He put his hands up and went, "No, no, no," begging for his life, and then I heard 2 shots and saw him fall to the ground. The killer had on a black mask and black gloves. When I saw them running around the pool, at first I thought they were just playing, till I saw the gun in his hand. Now, this is the testimony from a guy identified only as Jose. He was a witness in the murder of Gary Hutch that happened poolside behind the gates of a very exclusive gated community in Marbella, Spain. And like all the other witnesses in these hearings, the guy was behind like a shielded thing so you couldn't see his face because they were afraid the Kinahans would find out who they are. And if you remember in part 1, the Hutches were suspected of orchestrating the murder of a Kinahan man at the Regency Hotel, an infamous crime in Dublin in which at a boxing weigh-in for a Kinahan family boxing business event to which they had hundreds of people signed, it was stormed by 4 AK-47 wielding gunmen, and they killed a guy. And Tyson Fury's buddies, the Kinahan clan, their hitman would come to be convicted in this murder too.
James Quinn from Dublin was on trial for the murder of 34-year-old Gary Hutch, who was chased by a gunman around a swimming pool in a residential complex in Marbella in September 2015 and shot 15 times. Accompanied by a number of police officers, his lawyer and his translator, James Quinn received the jury verdict just before 3:30 Irish time. The jury found him guilty of acting as a necessary participant in the shooting of Mr. Hutch, ruling he was the getaway driver that day. They found the gunman wore a balaclava, meaning his identity was disguised, but DNA on a baseball cap found in the burned-out getaway car was Mr. Quinn's. Gary Hutch's murder sparked the ongoing deadly Hutch-Kinahan feud. Mr. Quinn was also found guilty of possession of illegal weapons discovered in a bedroom in the apartment in which he was allegedly living. He was remanded to prison and will be sentenced in a few weeks' time. He could face up to 28 years for the convictions. James Quinn's lawyers said they will appeal the verdicts. In a statement this evening, Garda Assistant Commissioner John O'Driscoll described the trial outcome as a very positive development.
Now, that Regency Hotel killing in 2016 was the event that really made the Kinahans kind of #1 priority for Irish and UK and Spanish law enforcement. And Tyson Fury now is suffering the consequences. He can't be led into the United States and is pretty directly related to that Regency Hotel murder. But what caused the Regency Hotel hit? It was this poolside murder of Gary Hutch. This murder launched the infamous Kinahan-Hutch family feud that's resulted in about 24 bodies dropping across Western Europe. Gary Hutch is the nephew of the infamous Jerry the Monk Hutch. Now, as a quick aside, nicknames often tell you a lot about the person. The monk is called that because he lives an ascetic life. Ascetic means, for our purposes here, he doesn't drink, smoke, do drugs, which is good, but in my experience, dealing with criminals or just being in a unsafe environment. I mean, I used to drink a lot of liquor when I was in Detroit. Not so much that I would get drunk, but just always wanted a double shot because it's always low-level anxiety. And in my experience, criminals especially, or anyone in an unsafe environment that doesn't need to ever get inebriated, that's who's usually in charge. That's who you need to watch out for, because often they're actual sociopaths. They don't feel any fear or anxiety at a time in which they should. Anytime he could be indicted or killed because they don't have any feelings at all. And that was the uncle of the murder victim in this case, and his nephew getting killed ignited the Kinahan-Hutch family feud. Now, if you remember from part 1 of our story, Jerry the Monk is currently awaiting trial. He was eventually charged in the Regency Hotel murder, and that crime, of course, fascinated media across Ireland and England. And Marbella, Spain, where it happened, lies on the Costa del Sol, the sunny coast of southern Spain. But it has another nickname, the Costa del Crime, because so many British criminals hide out, retire, or even set up shop there. And the Camorra, the #1 Italian criminal powerhouse out of Naples. They have a nickname for it. They call it Costa Nostra. So instead of Costa Nostra, our thing, they call it Costa Nostra, our coast, because so many Camaristas set up shop there or hide out there, and they can blend in with the high-level luxury tourists and the nice villas. Now, the Costa del Sol was also a place where a bunch of Kinahan property was seized, hundreds of millions of dollars worth, back in 2010, in something called Operation Shovel, where British law enforcement went after the Kinahans. They seized over $500 million worth of bank accounts and stuff. $500 million. And that didn't stop the Kinahans. They just got bigger after that. And the Kinahans didn't just let them have it. They fought them in court for an entire decade. And just recently, back in 2020, they pretty much got it all given back to them, and the money laundering charges that prompted the seizures were dropped. So Kinahan's sophisticated operators. And Marbella, Spain was also headquarters of their boxing business, MTK. Now, it's been shut down just recently as part of the whole backlash against them. I mean, Daniel Kinahan was a guy that was freely appearing on boxing shows. Boxing commentators referenced him, interviewed him. He was, you know, like a Don King. It'd be like finding out, not some rumor about Don King, but finding out Don King, you know, was secretly Big Meech or something. That's what this is kind of like. And Tyson Fury, of course, can't come into the U.S., and probably some of the other guys signed to MTK, which had 100 fighters at one point, over 100 MMA people too. It was a real operation that was making money. And so there's a guy we're going to talk about who got convicted in the Hutch murder, and guess what he was? An ex-boxer, of course. And he was living in Marbella, where their gym was at. And it's pretty smart if you're a gangster to have a boxing business. You always have a pool of financially struggling, tough guys on deck when the dirty work is needed. That's why I'm thinking of launching American Dope Combat Sports very soon, so stay tuned. Did you like that move? Did you guys like that move? James Quinn is the guy who was convicted's name, and he's now serving a 22-year prison term in Spain. And the prosecutor initially accused Quinn of being the black masked gunman who shot Hutch in the head after chasing him around the gated estate. But they gave the jury the option of convicting him of just being, what's it called? Basically like a lesser included charge that you would in the U.S. as being the getaway driver. Basically saying if you don't think he did the murder because he was masked, you can still convict him of being there, of being a getaway driver, and that's exactly what the jury did. So they didn't convict him of shooting Hutch, but no one else has been convicted, and Quinn was proven to be a necessary participant and has 22 years in prison. And Quinn was a Kinahan associate, and an investigation unraveled like this. After they hit, Quinn hopped in a Peugeot 206 registered to his own mother and driven by two Romanian brothers that he lived with. And then there was a second car used as a lookout, and that was linked by detectives to a Romanian woman who supposedly had some type of affair going on with Daniel Kinahan, the son of the founder of the cartel, Christy Kinahan. And the hitman had a photograph of Daniel Kinahan's mom, a woman named Jean Boylan, in his wallet when he was arrested. Quinn was born in it, not sworn in it. As they say, he's the nephew of a guy named Martin Foley, a.k.a. the Viper, who at 66 years old is still extorting people in England. The Viper was a member of a gang headed by a guy named Martin the General Cahill, who was killed years back by the IRA. Now, the hitman Quinn, like I said, was a boxer, and by all accounts, you know, he had talent. He was a legitimate boxer. And for the decade prior to his incarceration for killing Hutch, he'd been going back and forth between Dublin and Spain, and of course living in the Kinahan stronghold of Marbella. And the police had gone to Quinn not long before Hutch's murder and said that his life was in danger, so maybe, you know, that's why he went and hit Hutch. He had been making his living as an enforcer for a while and probably forged his big ties with the Kinahans back in, well, at least before 2014, but in 2014, there was a Kinahan enforcer named the Hatchet, Gerard Kavanaugh, and he got gunned down in Marbella at a bar, and Quinn was suspected but not charged. And then Hatchett's brother, Paul Kavanaugh, was shot dead back in Dublin 6 months after that. Quinn and the Kinahans, again, suspects. Most tough guys aren't killers, and some killers aren't even tough guys, but Daniel Quinn, the hitman, appears to have been both. And guys like him, even as dangerous they are, he was just a pawn in the game of Christie and Daniel Kinahan as they controlled their drugs empire. But why was Gary Hutch killed? Fueling a war that has left nearly 24 dead bodies up till now. I mean, it could have been Quinn taking him out because he thought it was life in danger, but probably not. The first big rumor, or the main rumor, is that he had been snitching to the Spanish or Irish police, depending what you read, about a cocaine shipment that had been lost. So they called him a grass, which is what they call a snitch in Europe. But documents released by the police after his murder showed that he wasn't. Not that documents released by the police are always correct. And then there was another kind of almost comically Guy Ritchie twist to this business. One story is that after Hutch informed or something, the Hutches paid $200,000 sort of like fine to the Kinahans, and they offered up Patrick Hutch, the brother of the murder victim, to get shot in the leg as like part of the payback. I don't know why you wouldn't shoot the guy who snitched in the leg, so this all sounds kind of weird. But so the brother did get shot in the leg, whether it was on purpose or what. But that wasn't enough because they still killed Gary Hutch. And if he let his brother get shot in the leg for him and he really was a snitch, he probably had it coming. But who knows what the truth is, because the only people that lie more than the police are criminals. And then there's yet another possibility, and it's that Gary Hutch was no snitch, but that the Hutch family had put $4 million with the Kinahans for some transaction, and it was stolen, and that's why the war jumped off. But whatever the reason, Gary Hutch was marked for death, and the mark hit his spot. And while the man convicted of the killing, Daniel Quinn, kept his mouth shut and insulated the Kinahans from trouble, a series of events was set into motion, culminating in Tyson Fury, one of the most famous people in the world at the moment, being banned from the United States because of the Kinahan-Hutch feud, a criminal war that's caused dozens of murders across Europe, and all that police attention, which made the Kinahans public enemy #1, and they're applying pressure on Tyson Fury, a guy who should be enjoying his success, coming to the United States, basking in the glory and raking in the cash, doing endorsement deals, appearances, but instead he can't enter America, and he's left to drunkenly kick at taxi cabs with associates of the same people whose other business dealings, like murder, got him banned from the country. And that's a video I show in part 1. And coming up next in part 3, the inside scoop on dope and murder, Ireland to Dubai, Dublin. What up, though? I see you shining now. Profit American dope.